What happens when you realize the life you've been building was shaped more by expectations than by your own voice? Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. I'm your host Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women paving bold paths. This week's guest is Yael Simon, leader, builder, and strategist. Through reflection and experience, she discovered something powerful. Alignment between who you are and how you show up changes everything. Let's dive in. Thank you so much for being here. We've tried to make this work for so long, and I'm so happy we're able to do it. How are you doing today?
I'm great, and I'm really excited to do this. I think I'm looking forward to the questions.
Me too. And I just want to say that you are, from all your work and all the things that I've listened to, it's clear that you're such a supporter of women. But I have to say, I have firsthand experience with this because you always message me on Instagram, like supporting my posts, supporting my episodes. And I just want to say, like, you don't just talk the talk, you actually walk the walk. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so we start from the very beginning on this podcast. We go all the way back to childhood. So talk to me about what Yael was like as a little girl. How would you describe
Okay.
yourself?
This is first of all, I'm very excited about these questions because I've been interviewed on other podcasts, and no one ever started from the beginning.
Really?
Yeah, it's quite therapeutic
Okay,
actually, but
yeah. Yeah.
no one started from the beginning. So I guess I want to thank you because I think that
Oh.
really does tell a story of where we were, and I'm a storyteller, so I often used to start my story from my father's story until I realized that's not my
Mm.
story, that's his story, right?
Powerful.
And so
Wow.
yeah, and I used to start introductions, for public broadcasts or speeches by when people would say, "Well, tell me about yourself," and then I would start with my father's story. And my father has an amazing story. He was from Baghdad, and he came over to Israel in 1951. I'd go through this whole thing, and then I always used to say, like, well, that's what shaped me. So now I have a different
Wow.
response. Yeah, I have a different response.
I have goosebumps
Um, yeah,
because that's.
because I won't say it shaped me. It definitely informed who I
Mm,
am.
mm,
It informed who I am until I could have agency over
right.
who I am right now and who I want to be. And it shouldn't surprise you that these are actually recent developments. Growing up when I did, parenting was different. Society's
Yeah.
expectations were different. So Yael, as a little girl, little Yael, as we say in
Yeah.
therapy, um,
Exactly.
was, yeah, little Yael was just as ambitious, just as excitable, just as, outgoing and creative and kind of taking all kinds of leadership positions, whether it was like the Shabbat group or this or that or whatever it was, but definitely much, much more scared than Big Al, that's for sure. Right.
Mm,
And probably also, and I know I'm getting into controversial areas here, but probably unsafe in a way that I didn't realize. That you only look
mm.
back in retrospect and you realize I wasn't able to fully be myself because of so many different circumstances. So, little Yael was definitely a version of Big
Yeah.
Yael, with all the bells and whistles, uh, but not fully developed.
So first of all, I want to say we love controversy on here. I think it's important because I think no, because I think everything that isn't controversial is so black and white, and life is not black and white. Like it's not possible to have life without controversy or gray areas, right? So I think that's what makes this interesting. But I like that you brought up that part because my next question was going to be if you can remember anything in your childhood that you like tried to like push away or hide away or felt like wasn't able to really come out that now you look back and you're like, why did I suppress that? Why didn't I feel comfortable
Wow.
expressing that?
Well, this is literally a summary of my childhood of suppressing things. No, no, really, truly. And if other people relate to this, great, but it's like a lifetime of suppressing yourself and holding yourself back because of so many reasons, Faye. Things like you want to please your parents, you
Hmm.
want to be the best student. Again, these might be pressures in the home or out of the home. They could be from a lot of places, but this pressure to conform, pressure to be the best, those are messages given to you from lots of different areas. A constant pressure and fear of not being able to, kind of perform at a level that's comfortable for you, um, that holds you back. So I think that a lot of times, as a child, certainly, we're trying to please people, we're trying to please parents, we're trying to please school and teachers and live up to other people's standards. And I think I certainly held a lot back, a lot of
Mm,
self-assessment, a lot of understanding who I was. I think that was the biggest thing that I held back, was giving myself an ability to know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do. And so it kind of takes years to get to a point where you're like, okay, that is outside of me.
mm,
And so what have I held back because I was trying to conform to
right,
everybody else's vision of who I am? What is my own vision of who I am? So I
right.
definitely held back a lot. I think anybody listening to this who knows me would laugh, but it's true. And I think parts of me that I held back weren't the go get 'em active parts. They were the more reflective and
Mm,
sensitive parts. And I think that's a
interesting.
result of kind of like, when you put pressure under something, when you put something under pressure, you know, people will say, well, you'll get the best, you
Hmm.
know, and that's not necessarily true. I don't think, and
Hmm.
I don't think that's true anymore. I think there's encouragement and there is motivation, and that's different from pressure. Pressure creates
Wow.
stress and fear. And so, as a child, when you talk about suppressing yourself, I think you can either suppress talents or you can suppress actual awareness and sensitivity. And that's what I held back, definitely.
Wow. You know what's so interesting is that I never asked anyone this question, and for some reason, this is what I put down on my questions to ask you, and I didn't even know this was something that was like part of your story. So just interesting how these things happen. Didn't come from research. Just this was just like I'm curious if there was anything she can reflect on.
No,
So
your questions are very, very intuitive, actually.
thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. That's the best compliment. I
Yeah.
love that compliment. So but interesting how this ties in because from what I understand, you became more religious in high school, end of high school, somewhere along those lines, all right?
Yeah, it's I don't want to say it's a funny story, but it's my story. So I
Yeah.
went to a Jewish day school, which was very Zionist, and
Hmm.
I formed all the great relationships and friends I had there. And I had some amazing teachers who made an imprint on me for life, from
Yeah.
teachers and Israeli teachers, and it was a great place. And I think I had a really great school life, and like Shabbat was kind of, it was different than it became.
Hmm.
But two things happened, and they kind of happened at the same time. One is I started babysitting for a religious family when I was about 12.
Mm.
And I looked at their life, and it was so different than the life I had been leading. And I didn't understand why. It was the same kind of nuclear structure, parents,
Hmm.
children. And yet there was so much like honesty or warmth. I don't know what was going on there, but it was very, very different experience. And it was the setback, the setting there was a very religious home. And at the same time, my father chose to send me to a non-Jewish high school when all my friends were going to a Jewish high school. And I know now that that was a very difficult time for me. I think then I felt it was difficult, but now I know how difficult it was to take a child away from their social circle.
Mm.
And I'm very sensitive about that now. Like, you need a social group, you need a social circle. And I went from being in a very small private day school setting to a massive public American high school with 4,000 kids. And like, forget the fact
Yeah.
that you didn't know who was Jewish. There were so many different religions. I like felt like I was thrown into the deep end. I
Yeah.
can tell you now, reflecting on it, that I wasn't comfortable and it was not a good place for me. Um, Academically, it was great. I know what I know now because of the great education I had, but I think, and my father was a teacher there. So it wasn't, I think now looking back, it's like, it's not all about the education.
Hmm.
There's a 360 look at a child now. And I made this mistake with my own kids. So like there's a 360 look at a child. Where are their friends going? Where are they going to be most comfortable?
Mm.
Where would they be able to thrive? And I did not thrive in high school. Academically, yes, straight A's. But again,
Right.
that was the pressure cooker speaking.
Right.
That was not where I thrived as a person and where I developed, skills of like social skills or learning how to deal with people and forget just being friends. You need a support group. And I did not
Yeah.
have a support group. And so my support group became this religious family and their
Oh.
community. And so I found a lot of safety and comfort with them.
Mhm.
They thought I was great. I was a great babysitter.
Yeah.
But they provided, and it wasn't false, it was real, but they provided a sort of temporary social group,
Mm.
even though they were 10 years older than me, really, young parents with little kids. Their whole community became, it was a Chabad family. So, like, the
Yeah.
whole Chabad community became, was so welcoming. And unfortunately, it took the place of having friends my age.
Mm.
So
Right.
there were benefits and there were drawbacks there, and it was not a perfect setup. I really wanted to be with my friends. And the irony is now that I'm reconnecting with all those friends I had from grade school.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
but I can tell you in high school, I needed that. And so becoming religious was a great, safe place to be where I had a community.
Yeah. There's two things I'm thinking here, and it's almost like contradictory. So one is, from what I understand, your father's reaction wasn't the most positive and nurturing towards your choice, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, now you're saying that you're choosing kind of your own life and your safety, but you weren't the kid that felt like you can do that. And so what happened there that you were like, actually, I'm now going to make this choice for myself,
Mm.
even though it goes against what my father wants from me and everything I'm used to in terms of like suppressing myself and suppressing my needs. Like, what was the pivot there for you?
Right. First of all, such a great question. Such a
I'm
great
genuinely
question.
curious.
No, 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 because you pointed out a contradiction, which sounds like a contradiction, but it's actually not, because I
Hmm.
know what happened is that, in place of discovering yourself, um, becoming frum is a great way to discover your identity as a Jew. And so your identity as a Jew, we'd like to say that it's all the same, but it's not all the same, because, becoming religious, learning how to daven, learning how to, believe in Hashem, learning how to be part of a community, all these things, it's a specific pathway. It's a great place to be when you're searching. And
Mm,
so I think the answer to your question, if I'm honest with myself, is that when I had to suppress myself and my personality and my ability to feel safe, I found a venue. I found a pathway to do that. Now, by going down that pathway, that religious pathway, I think eventually came full circle where I saw myself. But
mm.
kind of the channel then to express myself then was to say, well, no, I don't want what my father wants. I'm going to become religious. Whether that was rebellious, I know it's like reverse rebellion, but I think a lot
Yeah.
of people have that. They become, my father, like,
Yeah.
he did not want me to become religious at all. It wasn't, I wouldn't go so far to say it was an anathema, but I think it was a threat to the way he wanted my life. He wanted
Right.
me to be, an excellent student, which I was. He wanted me to get the scholarship to Harvard, which I did. But like,
Yeah.
he had a pathway that he wanted me to follow.
Right. Like this
And
vision that,
this vision,
yeah.
and it's such a great irony about parenting in general, because
Right.
whatever that vision is, at some point, the child has to have the agency
Hmm.
at some point.
Yeah.
And so my pathway was not straight because I took that agency, but I channeled it
Right.
into becoming frum. Whereas I think it might have been healthier for me to channel that into developing and having the agency over myself, self control, to
Yeah.
understand who I was, to create my own boundaries, that kind of thing. That eventually came, but only
Came
after.
later.
It came
Right.
through doing that first with religion, I think.
Yeah. You're right. It's not, when we look at it that way, it's not a contradiction. It's just
No,
like almost like that was like that was the tool for everything else. Like that was the starting point. Um,
it was
okay.
a substitute, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you built on top of that, right?
Mhm.
So again, we're talking about, you said really early on in the conversation that you weren't sure who you are, what you wanted to do. Your father wanted you to get the scholarship to Harvard. Like, talk to me about that period after high school. Did you have an idea of what you wanted for your career? Because the next part of the conversation is to be very much like you're an ambitious career woman, right? And you're really inspiring in that way. But was this something that you were interested in? I know you're really good at academics. Like, or was it just something that happened to you because you just ended up being good at it and it just like cycled into that?
Yeah. Look, I think I always wanted to be a lawyer. I was
Mm,
really good at debate, really good at logic, really good at critical thinking.
yeah.
I think the push, certainly from my father's background, and, he came from a really difficult struggle. And so he wanted to fulfill the American dream.
Right.
And I was kind of the embodiment of that dream. And he wanted it to manifest through me and his own achievements. He was he was a legacy. He had a tremendous achievements in his life. He was very successful. But I think, being the oldest in a Sephardi family, I
Yeah.
joke with my other Sephardi friends, it's like we were meant to be boys. And so, a lot of that sort of imprints on you. Um, I have a very good friend I just saw now in Chicago, and we talk about this all the time, how our fathers like treated us like a firstborn
Yeah.
son.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of pressure there. Um, I don't know if that's changed in the world yet, but it is what it is. It's
Yeah.
a cultural experience. And I know what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be an advocate. I would say not so much a lawyer, but certainly an advocate of changing things. And to my father's great credit, he did instill me with this belief that I could do anything and that I could change the world. Now, have I? Am I? I don't know. It's a bit debatable. I'm trying to,
Yeah.
but nothing. I think he definitely gave me this sense that nothing can stop me. Nothing.
Yeah.
And I, everything is up to me, right? Like
Yeah.
there's nothing that goes on in the world that you can't work around, get around,
Wow.
work harder. There's going to be a way. You're going to find the way. And, it's all up to you, right? Nobody's
Yeah.
coming to save you. Nobody's coming to help you. Nobody's going to give you an open door. No, you don't sit around and wait for a lucky strike. You're going to make it and it's going to happen.
Wow.
That was the greatest gift he gave me, right?
Wow.
So ambition naturally stems from that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
naturally. And you start to imagine all the things you can do. You think like, well, there's an injustice here, or I want to fix that. And so you start to get in your head that like there are things that are broken in the world and you can fix them. There are injustices in the world and you can right them. There are things that you can build, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
become like a solution person when you start to have that mindset. So I thank him so much, even though there was
Wow.
so much pressure in lots of different areas. That was literally the greatest gift that, can you give that to somebody else right now? I tried to give it to other people. But I definitely came from him. There's no question about that. So, growing up, I always wanted to be a lawyer, a lawyer. That was definitely in my mind. And I think that some things changed over time. And this was a critical moment after high school where I became religious and I rejected the scholarship. I rejected that whole pathway of going to university, going to an Ivy League university. And it wasn't so much about fulfilling his dream. It was about creating this pathway of agency for myself. Again, I want to go back to the beginning of this interview. It wasn't internal. This was external. It
Mm.
was about achieving things outside of yourself,
Right.
not developing yourself, but achieving,
Right.
achieving, achieving. And that's kind of the gap. So I recently pulled up from my siblings a letter that I wrote to my father when I was 18. I still have it. And it is a contract. And
Oh my God.
I have the date. I'm not going to date myself here, but it was mid 80s. And I wrote him a letter and I said, like, I read it now and I'm like, wow, I was really diplomatic. I wrote, like, I didn't even start off Dear Abba. It was just started
Mm-hmm.
off straight away with the negotiation of
Mm-hmm.
what he wants and what I want. And I wrote in the letter, we want the same thing. Like I actually
Mm.
wrote that as an 18-year-old, like, let's look at this. We want the
Wow.
same thing. And we want for me to be successful and we want for me to be happy and we want for me to be, and I understand he sees it that way, but I'd like him to see it my
Mm.
way. And then like all these negotiations about how I'm going to go off to seminary and like, oh my God. And his approach to that was just like, this is just, what are you even saying? Both ruining his dream and literally the
Yeah.
opposite he had invested in for 4 years before
Yeah.
that, this excellent education. And then suddenly I'm,
Yeah.
throwing a spanner in the works and saying like, actually, no, I want to become religious
Right.
and I want to seminary. And it was just like I was speaking a foreign language. Anyway,
Yeah.
I wrote this contract up. I still have it. I look at it from time to time and thinking about how brave I was to
Yeah.
finally say, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it's not what you want me to
Mm-hmm.
do, but
Wow.
we're all heading toward the same goal,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny because really, like, I'm hearing that and it's like, oh, of course you are the way you are today. Like, you had that since you're 18. You had that since you're a little girl, right? And I think you just said something very important that comes up a lot when I talk to women on the podcast is like tapping into like, what would little Yael do? What would little Faye do? Like, we were so brave back then. Maybe for you it was like the 18, but for me, I'm thinking like 15, 16, like, I want to be more like her, right? But and it's interesting. Some of us go through like I think we suppress that like childhood like bravery later on in life, and you have to find it again. I think it's like a ongoing thing that we have to do through life. It's like we peel back the layers, then you like put on another layer and you peel it back, right? It's a constant thing. So I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think there's a very big difference between the external development of
Yeah.
us from childhood to work life or ambition, and the internal development. And I was,
Yeah.
really so emotionally immature and not equipped to deal with so much of the dynamics that were going on between my parents and me, between them and
Yeah.
my siblings. And like, you're just not equipped. And the safest place to go is a place that is transactional. And
Right.
this is really, it is quite controversial to say this because transactions don't have feelings, right?
Right.
They are transactions. I always talk about money. Money doesn't have feelings. It's a transaction, right? It's just
Yeah.
business. And yet at the same time, when you talk about suppressing, I definitely suppressed developing, in a much healthier way for myself and my approach toward my own life and my own development in exchange for a
Mm.
much easier pathway, which was religion, where the community was so welcoming. I was the golden girl. I was really a high achiever within the Chabad community. I did so many things for them. And,
Yeah.
I ran the camps and I did all the programs. And then you belong to this community who's just so like celebrating who they think you are
Yeah.
because of all this ambition. And you kind of do wonder if anybody really sees you. Um, and all of that external validation comes in about like, well, if I achieve things and I go to work and I learn then I'll
Yeah.
be great, then I'll be okay. And actually, there comes a point where that comes crashing down because unless you have the internal infrastructure to support that, it's gonna clash. It's going to clash. You're going to come to a point
Wow.
where you realize internally you didn't have the scaffolding,
Yeah.
all of that energy on the outside, all of that external achievement and ambition. It sounds great, but without really being fulfilled inside, it's empty.
Yeah. I think anyone listening to this, like everyone's story is going to look very different, but I think you can tap into things that you're saying that people can relate to, themes in life. I think we all go through certain parts and points of our life that we experience something that you're saying here, right? I think human, it's a human experience. Yours might have looked maybe a little bit more extreme than other people in certain ways, but I think everyone can relate to something you're saying here, which is why I really appreciate you sharing this. I think it's really, really important. I find something really interesting because I think sometimes as women, we downplay our ambition. And I think for you, it was very much your identity for a long time. Did you ever feel like you had to downplay it, or was always like it was natural for you to be like, yeah, I'm the ambitious one. This is my identity. Like, I'm curious what you felt internally because we're talking external and internal here, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you
Hmm.
keep telling yourself that, you keep talking to
Right,
yourself, saying, even silently, without you even noticing, like, I'm going to do this. And then
yeah,
all the voices in your head are actually what you've been fed your whole life. And that works both ways, of course. I'm not an expert here, but like, it doesn't take an expert to tell you that if, your parents and your environment were constantly telling you you're great, you'll think I'm great, right? Or
right,
if your parents and your environment were constantly telling you you're not good enough.
right, right.
And so,
100%.
better or for worse, I had both messages. You're
Yeah,
great and you're not good enough, right? So it's a constant battle to suddenly, think, well, where do I sit inside of these two opposites? I think I'm good enough and then I'm not good enough. And like, how do you know what's good enough? And that's quite, I think, a sensitive cycle that people can get into, and maybe even a dangerous cycle that people get into of like, how do I know I'm good enough? And we'll get into, other things
yeah.
like, how do I know I'm worthwhile? How do I
It's
know
so interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because you were talking about one in one article, and I don't remember which job this was, but somebody was basically saying you're an expert in this, and you were thinking to yourself like, am I? No, I'm not. Am I? Right? You were talking about that like
Yeah.
you're seen as the expert externally, but internally, and I think that's when you went back for a degree or something.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Your
You
career
did a
is
lot of homework there. Good job.
humongous. Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember all the different
Yeah.
pieces, but it's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. It like it really is the they're saying this, but am I really feeling this? And that constant gap that you're talking about.
Right.
Um, so talking about your career, I think we can write a book about it. In a really positive way.
Yeah.
You've done so much, philanthropy, strategy. You had a fintech company. You like so many different industries, so many different. I think there's like the common thing that I think you said on a different podcast like 2 years ago was strategy, right?
Yeah.
You're a strategist.
Yeah.
Before we start the conversation about all this different stuff, like, can you just share what does a strategist mean to you? Like, why do you choose that word?
First of all, I like what you asked at the end. Why did you choose that word? That is exactly what happened, right?
Okay.
So, that's exactly how it happened is that I chose it. Um, and I like the fact that I chose it because, very often you walk into a room, networking event or something, and like, what's his name? He's a philosopher. He says, like, when people say to you, what do you do?
Right.
People get very scared by that question
Yeah. Yeah.
because they think that the answer is I'm a secretary or I'm
Right.
I'm a manager or I work as a thing. But actually that's not what you do.
Right.
That is just the name of the job.
Right.
So I've like kind of redefined it for myself because I struggled with that question because again, like you'll see, there's a running theme through everything I'm saying. I just never felt like whatever I was doing was enough or valid enough or qualified enough for a business meeting, for introducing myself to people, for, the world I wanted to be in, for anything. I didn't feel like on the religious side, I wasn't maybe like, good enough or religious enough. And on the work side, I felt like, so there's this constant
Wow.
feeling. Yeah, it's crazy. Um, Becoming a Balchuva or being a Balchuva, there is this feeling, I'm just going to say it because I know other people feel this way too, is that like, you're just never going to be accepted. It's like,
Wow.
whatever you do, yeah, it's real. You're never going to be accepted because there's this imaginary club that all
Hmm.
of the people who were born from are in. You are not in.
Interesting.
And no matter how hard you try to be part of, I'm over this now, but like no matter how hard you try to be part of a community or dress like them or talk like them or go on the same vacations or show up at the same events or give the same amount of charity or dress your kids that way or whatever it is, it's just people pleasing. It is
Wow.
not
Wow.
Judaism,
Yeah.
but it is driven by a fear that I am not good enough and I'm not accepted and I will never be accepted. And
Wow.
until you actually reach the point of that deep knowing of I am good enough in the eyes of Hashem. And so the community doesn't like this, doesn't like that. Okay, there are rules in communities. Every community has their rules. Let's put that argument aside. But like, I'm not good enough to be, a mechutin of somebody. I'm not good enough to be like it's such a terrible stigma, but it definitely stems from a fear of not being good enough, feeling you need to please everybody else, and that all of that has nothing to do with you. It has
Wow.
nothing to do with you,
Wow.
right? And so in the workplace, it's literally exactly the same. You're constantly thinking, well, I don't have enough qualifications, so I'm not like everybody else. You look at everybody else's LinkedIn, they've done this, they've done that, they've gone to university. And so like, when will I be part of this club of ambitious people who are doing things like you sit here and you say, well, you've done so many things in your life. And it's like, really? I'm just a street kid, I think. And I've learned along the way. So the word strategist was born because I thought about my actual skills as opposed to what the world was
Mm.
expecting of anybody, right? What was I
Interesting.
actually doing? Am I a fundraiser? No, I hated that title. It's just because the word fundraiser is a job. It's not who I
Right.
am,
Right. Right.
right? The word planner or, chief executive, which I've been many times, is a job. It's not who I am. So in the discovery of who I am, I worked out that I'm three things. I do three things. So when I introduce myself, I usually say I'm a strategist. Um, but when people are like, well, what do you do? I do three things. I build things,
Mm.
I make them go faster, and I make them sustainable.
Oh, I love
So
that.
on my website of my work, I have the three words that, everybody needs three words. So my three words are build, accelerate, sustain.
Love it.
And I feel that's like the theme of my whole life in general. Um, you know, uh, Although the accelerate part on a personal level, I try not to accelerate things. I try to take it
Yeah.
slowly. But certainly when I walk into a room and people say, what do you do? I no longer say a job because
I
I do
love
so
that.
many things. I just say I'm a builder or I'm a
I love
fixer.
it.
Yeah. And so strategy and strategist is just a different form of that. It's
Yeah.
understanding where the pieces are. It's like playing chess. You look at the
Hmm.
chessboard and you think a few steps ahead. Where is everybody sitting? How does everybody feel? How do I move here and move there? Every project I have requires so much thinking, so much
Yeah.
diplomacy, so much, you know, s- strategy of really looking at the
Brain
board.
power.
Brain
Yeah.
power of
Yeah.
like, if I move there, where does everybody
Right.
else go? If we make this decision, what happens? If we do that, what happens? Will we be far away? Will we be closer? What are going to be the challenges? What are going to be the
Yeah.
advantages? How are we going to leverage things? How are we going to scale things? Everything is about the strategy. But it really comes down to being a builder and a fixer. That's all.
I love it. Just a side note, I am a fintech founder, so I love this on like that level as well. I like very much
Oh,
relate, but I think that's really cool. And I think, they also talk about even one step further that like in America, when people say like, tell me about yourself, it's your job. And then like in Europe or other places, they tell you, oh, I'm a husband, I have three kids, I have, they go into more of the really what's your life rather than just what's your job. It's a similar type of thing here. You just like, you actually it's a really good perspective because I like this. You don't have to go to the personal, but really what are you doing that's beyond the title? So I think this is really, really helpful for people who are listening. But so I put this next question, and again, this is really funny because this is a theme going on here that I didn't really know why I was asking this, but now that I'm talking to you, I think it's really, really relevant. And I think I asked it because I struggle with it personally. When you do so many different things in life, right? You were saying you're like, I wasn't an expert, whatever, you're doing all these different things. Sometimes, or at least I have this, and it could be it's just a me thing where I'm like, am I good at anything or am I just a little bit okay at everything? Like the jack of all trades versus the master of none thing, right? Saying, quote, whatever you want to call it. Do you feel that tension ever, or are you comfortable with it now? Do you have advice for somebody like me that's like, I keep moving to these new things, and I think that's a strength. I think that's beautiful that I could go into these different industries and different things that you're building, but at the same time, I'm like, am I really good at one thing versus like the singer, the dancer, the actor, right? They have this one thing that they're good at.
I love this question. I also wanted to say I love the fact that you're a fintech founder, and we should definitely talk about that.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, and I think the answer is has levels and layers, and
Hmm.
it's an excellent question because the phrase is jack of all trades, master of none, right? So you do a lot of things, but you don't know how to do anything like particularly
Exactly.
well, or you do one thing, like you said, singer, actor, whatever it is.
Right.
I think the answer is what I just said. If you took all of the skills that you have, or all the things that you do, and you have a word for that now, and now we
Mm,
have the advantage of having, AI and stuff like that. And you put in, just imagine if you put in all the tasks and all the skills that you have and all
right.
the jobs you do into AI and say, give me one word that describes who
Interesting.
I am. See what you
Yeah.
come up with. I've never done this exercise because I did it manually, which
Right.
was well, let's see. I fundraise. I can do a bit of PR. I know how to organize myself. I'm good. I became good at people management. I became good at diplomacy. When I say
Yeah.
became good, it means I did them badly. And then I learned, right? So it's
That's how
not
you
that
learn
I
though.
was born that way. It's like
Right.
I didn't do it right. And then I had to learn, I
Yeah.
didn't manage people well. And then I learned how to manage people. Um, I learned how to look at processes. And I think it's worthwhile for me to describe how this came to be. How did I
Hmm.
become good at lots of things? And then it became a mishmash, like you said. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
And then that's where a little bit of the imposter syndrome came in, which was like, well, maybe I'm not really qualified to do anything.
Mm,
I need to be qualified to do something. And that is a complete mistake. But um, I had like a big episode in my work career, which kind of changed everything.
hmm.
And in that new phase of things changing, um, what happened was I was employed by some very, very wealthy people in private family offices. And every time they asked me to do something, they were like, okay, well, do you think you can do this? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, literally, my confidence was fake, but real.
Yeah.
Because every time I said yes, which I said just yes to everything, I never said
Hmm.
I couldn't do anything. Again, the education I had was you can do everything. So even though I didn't know how to do something, like they were like, okay, well, we need a business plan for this by Tuesday. I'm like, sure, no problem. I didn't know how to write a business plan. And so I quickly, and this is like, we're talking 15 years ago, there's no AI, there was no
Yeah.
Google was limited. So like, how do I write a business plan? So like quick education on how to write a business, call a few people, look at some business plans,
Yeah.
get the idea. I'm a quick learner, see one, do one. And then like, I'm going to write a business plan.
Yeah.
So there was one client I had, it was a very huge, huge hospital here in London, one of the oldest hospitals in London. It was the hospital to the royal family. They asked me to write the healthcare strategy for 2030. This was about 5, 6 years ago.
Oh
And,
my
and I was
gosh.
like, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. Okay.
Duh.
So it was like, you can argue, was that a fake it till you make it thing or not? Or I don't know
Mm,
what it was. I try not to give labels to all this stuff. I don't like to
yeah.
walk around with placards, fake it till you make it. I don't know what's right. I know what worked. I can't tell
Right.
you what's right. I can tell you what worked. And
Right.
so I just said yes. And then quickly I had to kind of I downloaded all this stuff from McKinsey on, the research and how to write a business plan or whatever. And sure enough, and I just kept my cool. And I
Yeah.
think the guy who was supposed to be managing me knew deep down that I didn't know what I was doing. But like I quickly learned all the lingo of the hospital. And then I created this whole strategy of how they're going to beat a new hospital that was coming to town. It was like the Cleveland Clinic.
Wow.
And like, I wrote this whole thing. It became like a Bible until today. Like
Mm.
when I saw them a few years later, they were like, had tabs on everything I wrote. I'm like, oh, so I wrote it.
Wow.
Okay. So the trick was that
Yeah.
every time I learned how to do something that I said I would do, I kind of preempted it by saying, yes, I can do this. I learned how to do it. I did it. And then once I realized it worked, I put it on my website as another skill I have. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
So back to your question, I learned how to do a lot of these things. At some point, it looked like a mishmash. And I'm like, well, what do all these things represent?
Right.
What is the skill that runs through all of these things that I've done? What is the personality or the trait that runs through all of these different tasks? It's strategy, right?
So
It's
interesting.
planning. It's being able to see things that don't exist. It's being
Right.
able to think ahead. It's thinking what's happening right now is not the most important thing. It's what right now is going to change into or
Hmm.
turn into and how it's going to affect what happens next. So I realized that
I
all
love
the
that.
skills and all the things I did. Now, to be honest, I did have a crisis moment where I'm like, okay, so now I've got a name for myself and now I know what I can do. And I just keep saying yes to everything.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm not qualified. And that was the part I think you heard in another thing. Is there somebody in government, high up in government in Israel said, oh, ask Yael, she's the expert. I'm like,
Right. That's what
no,
I was
no,
talking
no,
about.
I'm not. And that was, I thought, you know what? I don't think it's as much as a degree as it is getting an education,
Hmm.
right? And I wanted to educate myself on the areas that I really didn't know and that I couldn't just bluff it and say, oh, yeah, I know this.
Right.
Because there is a balance of skill, operational, and then knowledge. So, like,
Hmm.
knowledge plus experience could create a great work output.
Right.
Yeah. And so I wanted that knowledge and then I pursued it. And I, I'll be honest. And this is, I don't want to say I'm proud of this, but like when I stood on the stage of the graduation, when I graduated with the master's, um, I thought, okay, I'm smart.
I
Now I
love
know.
that. I
Yeah.
love that.
I was all right with it.
I think we all need one of those moments in our life to be like, yeah, everything that I was potentially contemplating, it's true. I can do this, right?
Yeah,
And sometimes that's like getting a job that you never thought you can get. Sometimes that's getting a
right,
degree that you never thought you're gonna. It doesn't matter what it looks like, but I don't think it's a bad thing to say that you have that one thing in life that kind of like that voice that like confirmed everything that you wished and wanted, right?
right. It was your intent. I love that you said that because it is an internal voice. It
Yeah.
is. It's not somebody telling you you're not good enough
Right.
because everybody keeps asking you to do stuff. And
Right.
so there's no outright rejection of saying, well, you can't do this because you're not good enough.
Right.
Nobody's saying that. No one is saying that. And so because no one's saying it, the only voice that you have is your own saying, I can't do this or I'm not good enough. And so I think everybody's got to go on that journey, whatever that is. For some people,
Yeah.
it could be education. Some people could be work. Some people could be, being a really great mother and
Yeah.
having healthy relationships and saying, actually, I'm good at this.
Yeah.
I'm okay. It's validation. I'm okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Validation. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you were talking about this like crisis moment. I want to just ask you advice for people because you said I love your quotes here. You said don't let a good crisis go to waste. And
Yeah.
this was talking about a specific point in your life. But like for people who don't necessarily have the skills, you I think are naturally very good at staying calm, doing what you got to do and doing the strategy.
Yeah.
Just deal with it. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Now I'm calm. Now I'm calm. I don't
Okay.
was always so calm. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So, can we just, I like to give advice to people listening because I think that's the point of me creating the podcast. People can tune in and learn. So, can you just share maybe a good tip or two to help people take the good of the crisis instead of just being like, oh my God, a crisis, and like getting stuck, freezing, whatever, all the different negative things that can, or natural things that can happen. I don't want to say negative, but you can turn that around and make it,
Well, a lot
good
of thoughts
ones.
come to mind. One is there is a sense of calm, which could be natural or could be forced. So I'm excellent in a crisis. I fall apart usually 3 days later. So like every crisis I've had in
Oh,
my life, I'm great in a crisis. I'm like,
mm,
okay, I know what to do. Whether it was like a child falling and we have to go to the emergency room, or it's
yeah,
a crisis at work, I'm great inside the crisis. It's afterwards that I think that the sky is falling, right?
interesting.
So yeah, so I learned that about myself. And I realized that when you actually say to yourself, while things are happening, first of all, you have to know when the crisis is actually happening in real
Mm-hmm.
time. And I've had some things I can talk about, something that I cannot talk about here, but like some major, major crises. Hopefully, in a few years, I'll be able to talk about the big one that I just
So
finished with.
we'll bring you back onto the
Well,
podcast
yeah, sure, no
then.
problem. It's just concluding now, and I don't want to,
Hmm.
mess with the hashgacha of it. So I'm just
Yeah.
going to let it be right now and not talk about it too soon. But, other work crises I've had, the first thing to do is to say, this is happening,
Mm.
right? Acknowledge that this is happening. Don't deflect. Don't pivot. Don't go to sleep. Don't panic. It is happening.
Yeah.
And I would say part of this is tactical. That's the way my brain works. For anybody whose brain is like very like, well, what's next? What do I do now? That is a tactical thing. How do I escape danger? Now,
Right.
what I'm saying is not just about a crisis that's actually happening physically in front of your face. It's also an internal crisis. I really
Right.
do like to mirror a lot of the external with the internal because it's what my journey has been in the last, 5, 10 years,
Yeah.
really discovering myself internally. So things that happen, when they're happening, there is a reluctance to admit the truth of that it's happening. So that's the number one thing. If your brain is tactical and you're thinking, well, what do I do next? What do I do next? I would say in work and personal, it's not a good strategy, right?
Mm.
It's not. Because if you're just thinking tactical, that is about escaping danger and running to safety.
Mm.
Now, God forbid if the building is burning, that's the time to utilize
Right.
that approach. What do I need to get out of this danger? It's the fight or flight approach, right?
Yeah.
So what do I need to do to get out of the house that's on fire so that I can get to safety? I would say in 95% of the cases, that is not
Mm.
the issue. That is not the issue. And so any crisis that happens, work or personal, requires a lot of pausing, in my opinion, right? A lot of pausing, a lot of thinking. Nobody needs an answer right away. People write angry emails. They demand things on emails. I'm sure you've seen this, and other working women have seen this too. They want answers or they're furious, whatever. Not every email has to be answered right away.
Hmm.
And I learned that from a PR expert. And he just said to me, everybody can wait. You need to
Mm.
stop and think about what is happening. Think about your internal reserves, right? And what is actually happening in your body right now, your nervous system, how it's reacting, because that will dictate how you're going to take care of an actual crisis, right? So those are the pieces that I was missing 15 years ago. I have
Wow.
them now, but it was a process. Okay.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's because it almost seems counterintuitive because
Right.
in a crisis, you want to go, go, go. You want to do, do, do. And in
Right.
fact, that's getting you nowhere. And I find that like I ride horses. And
Oh,
one of the, yeah, another, jack of all trades type of things. But one of the biggest things that I learned was when you get scared, your body wants to go into fetal position naturally, right? But the worst thing you can do on a horse is go into fetal position. You need to sit up straight. And it's like, it's such a weird, small example, but like I take that into my life always. Like just because your natural instinct is to shrink up or to run or to escape, it's usually the worst thing you can do. It's like
right.
similar to what you're saying here. It's like the pause, which I think is so hard for people. I know for me, like
So hard.
pausing,
Yeah.
sit with the
Yeah.
feeling,
Yep.
so hard.
Acknowledge that it's happening and you have to sit with it. And by the way, I absolutely love the example of horse riding. I ride horses, not like
Oh,
you. I love horse
yeah.
riding,
Okay.
but I know from experience, the good and the bad, like the horse can feel everything you're feeling.
Everything.
Such a good analogy. Um, because you absolutely have to be calm. Children absorb it from adults.
Right.
Your environment absorbs it. You're absorbing your own panic. It's just not helpful. It's not helpful.
Exactly.
Anger and all this stuff is not helpful. But sitting in the moment and
Yeah.
the feeling, and even like on the practical level, like I said, the emails, it's like, take a minute, pause,
Right.
take a beat. It's a
Right.
crisis, but unless it's a house burning down, right?
Yeah.
It can wait a few minutes. It can wait.
It's also taking that minute to figure out what type of crisis is this? Is this the type of crisis that I need to run? Is this the type of crisis that I need to sit? You can't do
That's
that
right.
if you're just reacting.
Right.
Have you written a book? Are you writing a book? Because I think you should
I
write a book.
am in the process of conducting enormous amounts of research that will probably end up being a book. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not crazy.
Well, you're very
Okay.
close. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so honestly, there's so much I want to talk to you about, but we don't like I could sit with you for hours, but I want to just focus on this topic, which I thought was
Yeah.
going to be the entire episode, but there was so much more to you than when I started doing my research, which is, women in business, women in the workplace, with all of that stuff, which is a huge topic on this podcast, obviously. A couple things that I want to ask you. You said that you used to see women as a competition or as competitive, and I think that's a narrative that we're often told and the media tries to feed a lot, right? I think we see it a lot specifically with celebrities. They're like put against each other and all that stuff. What shaped that belief for you, and then what shifted that belief for you?
Gosh, I know the shift. What
Okay.
shaped it, because the shift was a really critical moment for me, and it happened in 2014. I know exactly
So
when
let's
it.
start with that. Let's go backwards.
Okay, let's go to the shift. Um, I was working for a private family in their office and building their philanthropy. And I hired a magnificent woman. She's really great. And today I think we're friends.
Mm,
When I hired her, I'm older. And so part of what I had to do to build their philanthropy was a lot of things, but including hiring them a CEO to run the charity and to
mhm.
build the charity and register it and like everything, like literally from scratch.
Wow.
So I build things like that. So
Yeah.
I brought her in. She was a number three at a different organization, and I brought her in to be a number one.
Mm,
Now, until she came, I was very busy with all of the big donations and the big strategy and the big thinking pieces. And when I brought her in, I thought I was doing the right thing by the following: befriending her, like we're friends. Mistake, right? I thought I was helping her by shrinking myself so that she could
mm,
become the main person. Another mistake,
mhm.
right? I made lots of mistakes. But the biggest mistake I made was she saw me as threatening and as competition.
Mhm.
And I felt powerless to escape that role. And I remember
Wow.
so many conversations that she had with me about how, like, Yael, you're so good at what you do. Teach me, teach me. And I was like, I was kind I don't know if it was like fake or real, but I was like, I don't know. I don't have anything to teach, you know? But I knew in my head, like, if I'm honest with myself and I think back, that I was so much better at like the whole piece, but I had to hire a CEO. So
Mm,
I was shrinking myself, but not really. Like internally, I wasn't shrinking myself.
right.
Yeah. So like
Interesting.
externally, I'm like, oh, no, 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 take my name off the brochure. No, 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 no. It's about you. It's about you. And
Right.
it wasn't communicating. And suddenly I felt like there was just so much pressure. And in order to solve this, and I wasn't a good manager then, I had to get out of it.
Hmm.
And the turning point was when a major donor walked into the office and he said to me, he looked at her and he looked at me and he goes, wait a minute. This is a great line. He goes, wait, she's supposed to be you, but she's not allowed to be you. Wow.
Wow. That's
Wow.
so good. That's so good.
So good. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. So I realized at that moment that I was being competitive.
Mm.
I didn't want her to be me. She wasn't allowed to
Mm.
be me.
Interesting.
And that's
Wow.
where I broke the spell. I'm
Wow.
like, not going to let this happen again because how is it possible? So you see, when I talk about women being competitive against each other, I'm not talking about like, oh, I wish I was you.
Hmm.
The competition was inverted. I didn't want anybody to be
To
me.
be like you. Right. Right.
I'm
It's
like,
almost like the resource scarcity mindset, right? Like there's
yeah,
only enough for one. And I think
yeah,
maybe, and I have to admit, I was also like this in the beginning of my career. Is like, if there's so many seats at the table, which are very few for women, or
yeah,
they're getting better, then the math doesn't math if there's more than three, right? There can only be one or two, right? And
yeah,
so for me, that's where it started. That's what shaped my
yeah,
belief that I had to unlearn. But I think it's
yeah.
a very we're told this. I think we're told this.
You were told this. And I had to unlearn it.
Yeah.
And it was so shocking to me to admit to myself that I didn't want anybody else to succeed. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. When we talk about competition, classically it sounds like two people vying
Right.
for one place and then,
Right.
trying to make sure. Here it
Right.
was the reverse. Nobody's allowed to have my
Fascinating.
place. Nobody's allowed to do what I do, and nobody's allowed to be as good as me, right? And
So
I can
interesting.
say this now, so many years later,
Yeah.
but that was the day that I really changed, and I'm like, no, I need to be there. There was another episode. I'll just mention it very briefly here, where I was arranging a big women's event somewhere, and I tried so hard again to shrink myself. This was the mistake I made, and every time that I made this mistake, I mistake was shrinking myself and
Interesting.
thinking like it would be better if everybody else was great. And I'll tell you where that
Right.
comes from. My father, Allah Shalom, he fed me a line, which is correct. And it's not binary. That's the problem, is that like everything was so binary as a child that I just thought, well, it's like this way or nothing, you know?
Right.
He said, you'll never be remembered for being great. You will be remembered for making other people great. And
Oh.
I use this. It sounds good. It sounds great, right?
Oh.
Yeah, wait, it's not. It's not. Because
Interesting.
why shouldn't you be great?
Right. Because
Right?
it
It
sounds
sounds great.
virtuous, right?
Yeah,
It
it sounds
sounds
virtuous.
like right.
And the way he said it, you will not be remembered for being, you will be remembered for making other people great. So there is a lot of truth in that. And that is very much my women supporting women, but I don't do it because I want to be remembered. I'm now in a space, thank God, where it's like I genuinely want women to be successful. I want you to be successful. I want, other people I see on the internet who I've
Yeah.
made friendships with and relationships with. I want to help. I want to give them the tools that they're missing. I want them to be successful. Sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't. Sometimes,
Hmm.
like you said, it's just putting a like or putting a message, right?
Yeah.
So I don't see that competition anymore. A little bit of competition with the whole world is healthy, but only a little bit.
Definitely.
Yeah, a little bit. It's healthy,
Yeah.
it's good, but you need to know, again, external, internal, is this is this altruistic, or is it because you cannot stand the idea that anybody
Right.
would achieve what you would achieve?
Yeah.
You got to dig deep here. And like,
Yeah.
do you want what's good for everybody? And ultimately, you'll go to sleep and you'll know I did a good thing. I helped somebody else.
Yeah.
Or are you doing it because, like I said, you don't want anybody to occupy your space?
Yeah.
And that's competition. I think that's probably not healthy.
It's so interesting. It's all these narratives that we have to, if we have to, we
Undo.
actually sit, yeah, we have to undo them. And I think we're starting to. I think,
Yeah.
as I have
Yeah.
women on here, I think I'm noticing that we're starting to, which is a
Yeah.
really beautiful
It's
thing
an
to see.
awareness. It's an
It's an
awakening and
awareness.
awareness. And
Yeah.
just one more thing on that. I think there are children, and I might have been one of them. Maybe not, but like I see it in other people and other children as well, and teenagers and adults, basically everybody. If I can't have this, no one can.
Right.
If I can't be happy, everybody's going to be miserable.
Right.
I might have had a little bit of that myself.
Hmm.
It's like, why?
Right.
And so that like borders on the opposite
Right.
energy, which is the Yiddish is verginnen, right?
Hmm. And
Be
there's no
happy for
English word for
yourself.
it. Yeah.
There really isn't. It's like they say that it's easier to go to a house of mourning than it is to be happy for somebody else. I
Wow.
really do understand that because it's easier to pity somebody or to feel sorry for somebody
Right.
than it is to like genuinely
Right.
stand in their shoes and feel that happiness.
Yeah.
People who are making a simcha, people who are successful. It's like, don't just virtue signal and go, yay, good for you. It's like, get
Exactly.
into it.
Yeah.
Tell them, feel how it feels to have that win.
Yeah.
Express it, support them in ways that aren't seen by other people. So much of what we do, what I've done, Faye, in my life has been performative, right? On a
And I
personal and
think for all
professional
of us,
level.
yeah.
And it's just, I believe like for myself, I had to get away from it. Like if I
Yeah.
improve myself, if I'm successful, if I'm have a personal win, if I've developed something emotionally, I don't have to have witnesses.
Hmm.
I
Mm.
need to know that there's been something that I achieved, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. And it can go even further now with the age of social media and the witnesses and everyone. Whole separate. We can have so many different offshoot
Yeah.
conversations on based on what we're
Yeah.
saying.
You
Um,
don't need witnesses. You don't need
don't need
witnesses.
witnesses. Yeah. So I want to end off by asking you, like 2 years ago when I think it was 2 years ago when you were on this other podcast, you were talking about creating, at that point in your life, you're creating these new boundaries. And that was like a big theme in that
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
I want to ask you now, like 2 years later, what are you currently learning or working on?
Wow. Okay. Well, it's very ironic. My personal life has taken a very big change in these past 2 years. And there have been huge, huge challenges in that. A lot of soul searching and a lot
Mm,
of contemplation. I think when I spoke about it then, they weren't happening, but now they have happened. And so a lot of the boundary setting, again, it was there's a difference between talking about boundaries because it's popular and it's like a lingo and it's like the phrases we use like have boundaries. And
right.
then when you see other people put up boundaries, it's they're they could be external, they could be internal,
Mm.
but I think the greatest thing that I've learned is to create internal boundaries of not, and here's the difference. It's again it's a nuance, so I want to be careful to explain the nuance. It's not so much of like this isn't working for me anymore and so I'm out. That is very much, I don't want to call it external. I want to call it vocal. It's a vocal
Mm,
boundary. It's like
mm.
saying, I don't want to be friends with these people because they're bad influence on me. I don't want to work in this place because I just finished a podcast now where we were talking about how do you know when to stop working for a certain place or when to leave. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I'm gonna listen
So,
to that. Okay.
yeah. So that was very much about mentorship as well. But I think on a personal level, that really is, it's like I said, it mirrors it. And you have to know when things are working for you and when they stop working for you. And we're very much addicted to things working and thinking, great, I'm good now. This is
Right.
working. Whatever it is, a religion, becoming from, a marriage, a job,
Yeah.
friendships. Oh, this is working. What? No,
We're good.
not everything working
Right.
is going to work forever, and not everything that's working needs to work forever. It
Mm,
might need to work for a reason. It might need to work for a season. It might need to be forever. It's variable. It's not one thing. And so I would say that the boundaries that I've really learned how to create are, and again, this ties back to my research, and this is like everything. everything's connected, Faye. In my
Yes.
life, everything is connected. It keeps coming back to the same thing
Yeah.
of why didn't I ever create boundaries for myself internally to feel that I was worth protecting or that I was
Wow.
worth, yeah. And
Wow.
so it's not an external boundary, like I said, which
Mhm.
is don't come close. These were internal boundaries of valuing myself enough to know that I'm not going to be somebody's punching bag. I'm not going to people please. I'm not going to bend over backwards for things that are working or not working for me. I'm not going to allow myself to be verbally abused, or just because somebody else has a narrative about you doesn't mean it's true. But again, you
Mhm.
don't have to prove yourself. Hey, that narrative is not true. I used to be
Right.
very much like, this is not true. I can't be okay with this. It's not true. It's like whether it's true or not,
Right.
it kind of doesn't matter. What matters is you knowing what your truth is, your version of the truth or whatever that is, and saying, this is good for me and it's not good for me. So, how do you get to that point? You definitely have to examine your own concept of self worth. And that is not to be confused with self care, right?
Oh,
So,
nice.
like being seen is
Yeah.
not the same as being saved,
Mm.
right? I know I'm mixing up two ideas, but they're kind of the same thing.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very much the same thing. I don't need to be seen or be performative like I used to be. I definitely need to know when things are not working for me. I need to know when they've crossed a boundary. And the only way you can create those boundaries is knowing your self worth. What do you stand for? What are your values? When you know that, then you know that as soon as you reach that level, and it's not working, or somebody is violating those internal boundaries of what you stand for and what your worth is, if they are violating your worth and in a true and justifiable way, then you need to draw the line.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back to when I like slid into your DMs on LinkedIn and I was like, "Hey, want to come on the podcast?" And you're like, "Me? I'm not a trailblazer." Remember when you said that to me?
Yeah. And I said, like, well, which trail was I blazing? I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. So first
yeah,
of all, I told you I was like, I love that you asked that because no one ever pushed back on that. But
all right.
I have to say there's so many different layers here that I can say you are blazing trails. But I think the one that most stands out to me is that you're clearly constantly, and I know it's an ongoing thing, but like doing that self-reflection and sitting with the feelings and sitting with like, how do I better myself? How do I make sure my external meets my internal? And I have to say, not many people do that. That's like it's special. And again, I'm not trying to like compliment you and be like, oh, like, but I truly mean what I'm saying. Like, I knew your career and I knew like that is inspiring to me. But if we look back to this conversation, we barely talked about your actual career. And so I just wanted to say, like, you are so much more than just the things you've done. You're
Thank
like,
you.
yeah. I'm just
If I
like,
had,
thank
if
you
I
so
had
much for
one
sitting
word,
me.
first of all, thank you for the reflection, and the questions and the opportunity to be here. And I also didn't know that I was going to say all this. But if I had one word to summarize it all, it's alignment. I use it at work
Mm,
all the time with strategy. It's
yeah,
alignment. To be aligned internally with what you're doing externally, whether it's personal relationships or at work,
yeah.
is so important. I think, and I don't want to make it sound like I've always been this way. I haven't. I am an absolute work in progress. I am constantly
That's
reflecting without beating myself up. I
that's
do
an
sit,
important one.
I do sit in grief, and I
Yeah,
sit with it and feel it. I don't deflect. I don't distract myself.
yeah,
I'm in it, and then I see out of it, right?
yeah,
I kind of work myself out of it. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much. I truly like. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm so happy we got to make this work, and we're gonna have some coffee chat sometime because there's more I want to talk to you about. Thank you,
Very
Elle.
welcome.
Thank
Anytime. Thank you so much,
you.
Faye.
Yeah.